day or good evening. Welcome back to another episode of Fued, a podcast where we debate current issues in the world with some of our members of the United States who laid the groundwork for our democracy. Today, I'm joined by two esteemed figures. May they please introduce themselves?
Hello, I'm the renowned Federalist Alexander Hamilton, a New York delegate to the Constitutional Convention. Some of you may know me as a major author of the Federalist Papers. I was also the first Treasury Secretary of the United States. I'm pleased to be here.
Hello friends, I'm Samuel Adams. An anti-federalist, I was a delegate to Continental Congress, Lieutenant Governor, and a governor of Massachusetts. I'm thankful for the invitation.
We're glad to have you both. Today's topic is about gun control. According to the Gun Violence Archive, there have been 488 mass shootings in the United States just last year. This has caused a divide between Americans. Should we have our Second Amendment rights, or should we question our right to bear arms for safety reasons? Today, we have guests with very differing viewpoints. We will debate whether this decision should be up to the state or federal government, with our Federalist Alexander Hamilton and our Anti-Federalist Samuel Adams. Let's start with the broad question. Should it be up to the state whether you can carry a firearm or not?
In my opinion, no federal law should tell you who should use or fire a gun. If the federal government has control over firearms, then the economy will suffer because hunting contributed to $380 million of revenue in 2020. And that number was during COVID-19, which would probably bring it lower than it normally was. On the other hand, if you don't allow for states to control the use and number of guns, you run the risk of high crime rates and you might infringing upon the rights to bear arms. We must keep our states in control because they will allow us to be individuals.
I believe that our national government, not the states, decides whether we can carry a firearm or not. We should not allow the state governments to determine how weapons should be regulated because I believe they would overlook many factors and they may not be as strict when it comes to the sale of firearms. This is why we need the federal government to enact strict policies on the sale of weapons. For example, we already have the federal firearms license where background checks are required for the sale of guns and prohibiting those who have a criminal background unable to purchase one. I disagree that the economy would suffer with the way certain laws are set into place. Gun manufacturers ensure that every firearm produced has a serial number so it can be traced back. They are to have detailed records and they must comply with the National Firearms Act. The gun manufacturing industry creates new jobs and as of 2023 has added $90 billion to the economy as well as the creation of 300,000 jobs.
Prohibiting criminals from buying guns goes against the Second Amendment. Therefore, it would be unconstitutional for a law to be enacted.
But if we allow the states to see whether or not you can carry a firearm, it would prove disastrous in many ways. There will be states with varying regulations which will have many individuals like me asking this simple question. Would these states heavily enforce gun control laws or not?
That is the question they should be asking because they are the ones affected by this. And if they deem guns need a stricter policy, then they can do that. But if people think guns should have less strict policies, then that should be allowed as well.
This will cause inconsistencies for the gun owners traveling between states.
There are inconsistencies in every state, like gay marriage and weed and more.
These inconsistencies will result in loopholes where prohibited individuals will be able to bypass stricter regulations and get their hands on firearms in states with more lenient laws. Thus, it would be ineffective as law-abiding citizens would be affected by these regulations.
There couldn't be loopholes that are easy. There wouldn't be any loopholes to avoid because of the good faith and credit clause, which makes it so people's laws and policies made in that state carry over to their state. So if someone were to go to a different state, they still have to abide by the laws of the state they came from.
That being said, there could be states that decide to ban firearms completely. However, this would be a violation of the Second Amendment as every American citizen has the right to bear arms. As of today's day and age, there is an estimated 32% of Americans who own a firearm. We do not allow the states to regulate the sale of firearms simply because there is so much that could go wrong.
I can see you're both really passionate about the rights of the state and federal governments. On the topic of that, I'd like to introduce another hot conversation we've been seeing lately about the pre-qualifications to own a gun. First, let's talk about background checks. Our federal government does, in fact, require background checks across the nation, but only with licensed dealers. This means that people don't need to show background checks as being bought online or at a gun show, for example. Do you think this is adequate enough? And should current laws be changed to only require background checks by state? Samuel Adams, let's start with you.
If you allow background checks to go to the federal government, then you're allowing the people with all the power to take your right to privacy, because they might start with your name and your criminal record, but when the door opens, there's no shutting it. This might start with background checks for guns, but when they don't trust you, the people of this country, to travel to another country, and it turned the McCarthy trials all over again. Once government loses trust in its people, is the day we turn into the thing we said we would fight against.
Those were good points. Alexander Hamilton, what about you?
Federal law should continue to tighten its gun regulations because state regulations may be more lenient than federal law. The Second Amendment ensures an individual's right to bear arms for protection. Having background checks for individuals at least lets us know the kind of people inside our country. It shouldn't be left up to the states to decide whether or not they should require background checks. It'll be much more chaotic and unstable. It might seem like it is the right call to have this installed at a local level, but what concerns me is how someone could easily bypass their state laws by going to a state where it is much simpler to obtain a firearm. What if that state doesn't require a background check?
Then we can make federal law banning you from buying guns from outside of the state you live in, so then we can keep our state's power while avoiding future complications.
Those were good points from both of our delegates. But next, what about training as a requirement to own a firearm? Currently, 9 of our states require us to undergo training procedures to own one. Should this be a right of each state, or should it be a federal requirement to protect the lives of our citizens?
It should be a federal requirement for every individual to undergo basic firearm training and be certified before obtaining a firearm. There are a lot of gun owners out there who lack safety training and therefore put others at risk if they are ever careless. The fact that there are only 9 states that have this requirement proves that the states alone are incompetent in promoting gun safety, which is why it should be up to the federal government to step in.
While only 9 states have training requirements, I believe that if you take away the ability for states to train people, you underestimate how big the U.S. is and how diverse the landscapes are throughout the country. If you try to apply this rule, it might be too broad and you can lose proper training for the environments that people need it in. And if you try to take it too selective, then people won't be able to protect their Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, this is a tough one. It's difficult. One side sees the importance of this varying by state to aid the needs of each individual, but the other side sees the importance of protecting a constitutional right.